All this as Biden faces the lowest polling of his presidency, and Axios analysis shows his fifth quarter job approval is the worst rating of any president since 1954, with the exception of President Trump, Biden besting by only 2 percentage points. Of course, we had the height of the pandemic, but we'll move on. All of that is troubling for Democrats, who are now 194 days away from the midterms. Yes, I'm counting. But the White House now has a plan, it says. They say we should expect to see more of President Biden ahead of the November elections, and he's expected to push a message of unity. He's their plan to help them win. Will Cain, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Will, what do you say about that?
I'm in disbelief, and I mean that literally, Harris. I do not believe the White House. I do not believe the Biden administration that the answer to these problems will be more President Biden. As I've been listening to the top of your show, Harris, it's getting really difficult to quantify, meaning keep up with the number of issues that are failing the Biden administration, or rather where they have failed the American people. Inflation, gas prices, foreign policy, Afghanistan, crime, COVID. On the fundamental principles of Western civilization like free speech, as we watched them yesterday begin their ministry of truth, the Department of Disinformation under Homeland Security. Every step of the way, they are out of touch with the American people and seemingly, Harris, choose the wrong path. And now they say the way to get on the right path before midterms is more President Biden. I don't believe you. I do not think that you're going to put President Biden out there, certainly in an uncontrolled environment, to answer to questions and the press. He won't be on the Faulkner Focus. He won't be talking to reporters. He won't be talking to the American people in unscripted moments. I do not believe you. And even if you do decide to do that, well, I'm still in disbelief that you think the answer to getting yourself on the right track is more President Biden. Will he come out? And look, I'm saying this somewhat facetiously, but not completely. Will he come out with the Easter Bunny? Will the Easter Bunny be there to guide him along the way as to what he should say and where he can go? I do not believe that President Biden, more President Biden, is the answer to our problems.
Yeah, you would hope that you were being facetious. The problem is we actually saw that recently. We saw someone dressed as the Easter Bunny at that gathering at the White House over the holiday weekend a few weeks ago, and he was about to get into Afghanistan, and it was clear. I mean, the bunny was like ushering him away. It is a joke, but it's also a metaphor for what we're dealing with right now. There have been plenty of notes that he has read to the nation. They're telling me that I can't take this, I can't do this, I can't go there. It's not what's on the schedule for today for me. I must move, I must turn, almost in that kind of staccato talk.
You also hear it directly from the First Lady. At that same Easter weekend ceremony, you can hear her saying, stay seated, now wave. He is always under direction, Harris. And so let's continue the symbol. I think you're exactly right. It is symbolic. So let me, again, only half-heartedly facetious, ask this question. Who's in the costume? Who is the Easter Bunny? And I obviously don't mean that simply as to who's wearing the costume that day. But who is guiding the president on a day-to-day basis? This is supposed to be the leader of the free world. And we as the American people have a very righteous reason to ask, who's in the costume? Who's guiding the president?
And as you ask that, people may say to themselves, he's about to speak on verbal support for Ukraine. The world actually would like to know, and it's a metaphor that we're using, obviously, not seriously, but behind the scenes, who is playing the role of guiding him through the gates of leadership? I want to get to this. Gas prices still sky high as summer travel is approaching now. Well, goodness gracious, we're only a couple weeks away now from getting ready for Memorial Day weekend. A lot of people travel on the road for that. This just adding to the list of issues which are plaguing Democrats ahead of the midterm elections. The national gas average for a gallon of regular is up by more than $1 from 1 year ago. Democrats are saying they plan to take action.
And the discussion is ongoing. We are definitely going to act to try to address the geopolitical issues that relate to gas prices being where they are, act in terms of some of the supply chain challenges.
The debate over domestic fossil fuel is ramping up. A Daily Caller op-ed calls President Biden's reluctance the, quote, ultimate energy wrecking ball. It says the Biden administration continues to do everything it can to block and discourage fossil fuel production and transportation. The goal of these Biden policies is to drive fossil fuel prices permanently higher in hopes of forcing Americans to embrace even higher priced wind, solar, and electric vehicle technologies. This is a policy of chaos for our economy and national security. Let's start in the reverse. Let's start with national security with all of this, Will.
Yeah, so I think actually, Harris, what we're seeing here play out is a policy of success for the Biden administration. In other words, the Democratic Party, dating back at least to Barack Obama and with Joe Biden as vice president, has been very clear about their attitude towards fossil fuels. They don't just want to wean us off, they want to choke us off. They want to price us out of fossil fuels. And President Obama at the time had talked about it openly when it came to coal. And the Biden administration, and really most of the Democratic Party, has really said the same thing when it comes to gasoline prices. Raise them until they are unsustainable, forcing us into what they would describe as sustainable energy alternatives. Joe Biden says this is the #1 issue, by the way. He said it a week ago. The climate crisis is the #1 issue, above inflation, above Afghanistan, above Ukraine, above everything. He said this is the #1 issue.
He can say that,
and so what I'm saying to you is,
He can say that, but he's disingenuous about it. He's about to walk up to this lectern, and I want to give you a chance, Will, to wrap your comments, if you would.
I would just say when it comes to gas prices, therefore, what we're seeing is the effect of an intentional policy. Rising prices is the goal of the policy. They can't turn around today and now say, I wonder if a tax holiday would solve the American problems. The problems are by design.
Wow. But again, he can say that. He wants to get oil from some of the dirtiest producers on the planet, like Venezuela. So I don't know if he wants to go green or if it's about green at all. Will Cain will bring you back.